Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Board of Appeals meeting, calling the meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Present, we have Wendy Smith, who's the chair, Stephen Isaacson, James Robinson, Scott Waligora, Kevin Matthews, attorney Kevin Landgraf. We also have representing Strand Engineering, Phil Producic. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law. And we are now moving on to the second item, which is the approval of the Board of Appeal minutes from April 9th, 2025. And I'll turn it over to the chair, Wendy Smith.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Appeals. The first item for us to consider is the draft minutes for the meeting at April 9th, 2025. The only thing that I caught in these draft minutes was that the last voting matter that we had for 4225 North Morris Boulevard, the dissenting vote, I don't think was Stephen. I think
It was me.
Oh,
yeah, right, it was. So I think that can just be swapped out. But other than that, I don't have any suggested revisions. Do any other board members have suggestions? Corrections? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
And a second? Thank you. The minutes are approved as amended to swap out the name for the dissenting vote. Okay. We have one item on our agenda this evening, which is a revisit to the request to appeal the village's enforcement regarding a downspout disconnection requirements at residential property 4074 North Lake Drive. Previously, we had heard this at our January 14th meeting. And at that time, the board voted to have testimony from Strand to better advise the board as to the particular qualities of this property. So it was continued until this meeting. Prior to getting started with that item, I'd like to ask for our village attorney to go over the standards by which the Board of Appeals must abide when considering this downspout disconnection matter. So I will turn it over to our representative from the village attorney.
Thank you. The standards are outlined in two locations in the ordinances, but they are mirrored essentially in 415-18 subsection B3. Exceptions are outlined A through B, and that includes whether or not the roof drain is external, sufficient space available to locate the discharge point at least 5 feet away from the basement or foundation walls, property lines. Pervious surface is available at the discharge point. The discharge location is level or slopes away from the structure, but not so steep that the discharge will cause erosion. And the discharge water will not create ice on pedestrian walkways or otherwise create a nuisance for adjoining properties. So when those 5 elements are met, the downspout, as identified by the village engineer, is expected to be relocated away from the community's sewage line. And I'll obviously, Phil, kind of touch on the general applications, but then more specifically as we this application as well, how it applies to.
Prior to entering into testimony from Strand's representative, are there any questions for the village attorney at this time as to the standard applicable here? And if questions come up, we can ask you as we go along.
Perfect.
Okay. At this point in time, we will call the matter, which is item number, item number 4 on our agenda, the request to appeal the village's enforcement for the downspout connection requirements at residential property 4074 North Lake Drive. At this point in time, what I will do is I will call the village's representative from Strand to make a statement, and then the board will have an opportunity to ask them questions. Following that, I will call the homeowner or the homeowner's representative to make a statement if they wish, and then we may have questions as well, and then we'll enter into some deliberation. Toya, can you swear in our witness on behalf of Strand?
Yes. Phil, can you raise your right hand? Do you attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Do you have a statement to provide regarding this particular property and the downspout connection notice that was issued?
Yes. Yeah, I can. I don't know. Do you want me to just run through kind of a background on it? or
Some
is
of
this
our
a-
members have not heard this matter previously, so I think it would be helpful for you to start from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the overall program itself is driven by trying to minimize the amount of clear water that gets into the sewer system to minimize basement backups and sewage overflows throughout the village. So that's kind of the big driver behind this downspout disconnection program. So in June of 2022, a representative from our firm went out and did downspout evaluations to determine if they were exempt or not exempt. So this particular property has 4 downspouts and have kind of that summary figure. The first downspout in the front yard, which I have labeled number 1 on the bottom of the sheet, is exempt because there isn't a pervious surface to drain to. The second downspout we identified as not exempt because there's pervious, well, it meets the 5 criteria that the village attorney outlined, in our opinion. And I did do a site visit last week to just kind of double check that everything we had thought previously was still true. And I'd still believe that that number 2 meets meets all the requirement for it to be not exempt. The third downspout, which is located in the backyard of the property, is exempt. It discharges into an area where there is no pervious surface. And then the fourth downspout is also in the backyard, and that one does meet the criteria for being not exempt. The one potential exception there would be is that the water could potentially get to the Lake Michigan bluff, which would be considered, a steep discharge that could cause erosion. That being said, it's about 60 to 65 feet from the house to the bluff, and there is a manhole structure in the middle of the yard that appears to be the low point, and also appears to have some drain tiles in it that could potentially drain the yard. So if that downspout was disconnected, it looked like the water would flow towards that manhole, and it was unclear where that manhole was connected to. I suspect it's connected to the same sewer that the downspouts are connected to, but I couldn't tell from opening it, and the property owner was unaware of where it discharged to either. So that's kind of a summary. I think our initial kind of exempt, not exempt classifications meet the criteria that are outlined. Didn't see anything that would say they did not.
Are there questions for the witness? People are thinking, can you tell us a little bit about your qualifications or your expertise in making these types of determinations? How long have you been doing these types of decisions? Anything else that can give us some idea of your qualifications?
Yeah, I'm a professional engineer licensed in Wisconsin. I've been practicing now for about just 20 years, almost to the date. And I do all sorts of projects with site grading and drainage and those sorts of things. So.
Any additional questions? Okay. Based off of the backyard disconnection number 4, if the manhole cover, if the manhole was not present, can you say one way or the other whether disconnection of that downspout would have a negative effect on the bluff area?
I can't. That would take a more detailed analysis.
Okay.
And the bluff is kind of a unique situation.
Okay. No further questions?
Yes, I'd like to know,
if these downspouts are disconnected, what alternatives are left for the homeowner to make sure that their functions can be met with another downspout? I mean, what are their options once these downspouts are removed?
Well, they wouldn't be removed. They would be, right now, they discharge directly into the city's or the village's combined sewer system. So they'd be removed. That connection to the combined sewer system would be removed and they would discharge to grade to the ground surface. Like everywhere else, any part of the village, like west of Oakland, that's where the downspouts go. They go into a front yard because it's a separate sewer area. And then this particular program was for the combined sewer area, which the combined sewers, you have stormwater and sanitary sewage in the same pipe. And we're trying to eliminate as much stormwater from that pipe as possible to provide additional capacity during these wet weather events. So it would go, the discharge would go onto the grass or the pervious surface. And then from there it would, ground saturated, it'll make its way to the street or the curb and gutter and eventually into the system. But it slows it down or it infiltrates into the ground so it doesn't get to the system.
Did we answer the open question?
What was the,
Um,
what was the
you
open
said the
Oh.
reason why this was brought back.
Well, we determined that additional testimony from an expert was needed. Last
so
time, a
right.
representative from Strand was not here.
Oh.
We had, I believe, Inspector Burris present, who did not conduct the actual inspection of the property. So we postponed hearing to allow a representative from Strand to attend and tell us more. So I think that's been achieved here.
I think another thing to point out too with the downspout in the backyard, and Justin, you can correct me too if I'm wrong here, but I think it could be routed down the bluff. Like that's what I reviewed a potential property along Lake Drive, and that's what they were planning to do with their downspouts is route them down to the bottom of the bluff to avoid, having that water on the top of the bluff. So it's an option, obviously an expensive option, but properties along the lake have done it.
One more question. Say with any certainty what the impact would be on the yard or surrounding property if these two downspouts are removed?
At the downspout in the front yard, I don't think there'd be much impact at all. It's very common and throughout the village, there's a lot of situations where there's a lot less impervious surface to discharge to. The backyard, obviously with the bluff, that one becomes a little bit more difficult to just make broad statements on. I think with the manhole in the backyard, if it was just connected where it currently is and extended out 5 feet from the house, the water looks like it would make its way into the manhole, so it'd probably have very little effect on the yard. Alternatively, like I said, it could be routed down to the bottom of the bluff, and in that case, it wouldn't have any impact on the yard. And on the adjacent properties, the risk obviously would be if it did create some sort of issue with the bluff, creating a slide on the bluff that could impact a neighboring property.
It's a little bit difficult to tell from the photos, but could you tell us about whether the surface next to the non-exempt downspouts are level with the property or level with the structure on the property, or whether there is possibility of erosion or seeping into the foundation?
Yeah,
Things of
they're
that nature.
generally sloped away from the house at a fairly mild slope.
Okay.
At what I would consider a normal slope for a property. Mhm.
Well, I have a question. As I read the disconnection criteria, the downspout must have at least an area 5 feet away from the basement or foundation of the structure. And you've determined that to be the case for both of these two locations. The one I'm looking at in particular is number 4. And how far, if you know, is that manhole cover from the structure?
I didn't measure it, but I think it's about halfway. So it's, I would say 30 to 35 feet
Okay.
from the structure.
And if you know, if there was, let's say, an 8-foot downspout extension placed in the rear downspout, went into the yard 8 feet, if it's a fair question, during a typical rain event, how far from the end of the downspout would one anticipate that the discharged water would flow? Going to flow more than 30 feet?
It depends on the underlying soils. You know, if they're
Mhm.
clay, very impermeable, flow a little bit further. If they're more porous, like sandier soils, then it get absorbed, flow as far.
But, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, generally, from what I know from projects along the Lake Michigan Bluff, it's generally clay. I mean, there's probably 4 to 6 inches of topsoil and then clay below it. So once that topsoil layer is saturated, then it would start to flow across the ground further.
And given my example of an 8-foot extension downspout, it would have to travel roughly 57 feet to reach the bluff.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Refresh us on what was the reason that homeowner?
I'll kind of summarize, unless you would like, someone would like to represent what was issued in the downspout connection notice. But my understanding is that the homeowner received a downspout disconnection notice where downspout marked as number 2 and number 4 were ordered to be disconnected. And then the homeowner filed their request for review to appeal that enforcement action. And so now we have the opportunity to see whether the village was within its authority to order that disconnection.
But what was the substantive matter causes the homeowner to request the appeal?
So, and the homeowner can clarify when they have an opportunity to make a statement, but I recall from the last meeting was that there was some concern about particularly the back involving some retaining wall structures that were being put in the backyard, suggesting that there may have been a greater issue relating to erosion to the bluff, and I'll allow the homeowner to go further into that once they have a chance. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. Thanks.
Any further questions for the witness before we move on to the homeowner? Go ahead.
Question on one that's how much surface area roof is that? Doesn't that, I mean, that
Yeah, it matters. I did not bring that with me, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't have that in front of me or available right now.
Is this home typical for other homes in its neighborhood or district? Or is it a very, very large home that might generate lots of water coming off?
No,
the roof?
if you look at the aerial photo, you can see it's not an unusually large home, I guess.
Any additional questions? All right. Hearing none. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask the homeowner or the representative of the homeowner to come up and make a statement. If you could please make sure to speak into the microphone so that we can capture your voice on the recording, that would be great. Toya?
Can you state your name, please, for the record?
Mark Canuco.
Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Canuco, if you can provide us with a statement of information about these 2 particular downspouts as to why you think disconnection should not be required, particularly about special conditions about the property that could help us. So I'll turn it over to you.
Apart from the additional cost of doing something like this, one of the suggestions was to go down and out past the bluff is astronomical. It's just really very expensive. But my concern was They're both on the south side of the house. The front one would drain, if it were to drain 5 feet from the house. My concern was there's a driveway right next door and there's kids and a family right there. I'm afraid of ice buildup that I've seen in other situations on the sidewalk when you walk, where all of a sudden there's ice patches where it's a dry sidewalk and it's coming from these downspouts that are buried underground and then they seep up. So that was the concern in the front. And in the back, it was any kind of water discharge in the back contributes to the erosion of the bluff. And the retaining wall you're talking about is, it's to hold that back. So if I drain even one gutter into the backyard, it's going to increase that flow. Like you say, it's about 6 inches of topsoil and it's clay, and then it runs right to there. And then, so that's what the issue was for me.
So on the point of the restraining walls or the retaining walls, excuse me, in the back, are those things that have been put in place already? And
No. The plans are done with Miller Construction.
Okay, and so what's like the timeline and why was that recommended for your property?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The retaining walls? So it's
The bluff is slipping.
okay. So was that assessed? You can tell us a little bit more about how that was assessed by some party and recommended that retaining walls be put in, and that will eventually be done?
Sure. Miller Engineers in Sheboygan have determined that the slippage is because of additional water that slipped over the years. And each year we lose about a foot or so. So we're trying to hold that back and regain what was there. Additional water would just exacerbate the situation.
Okay. Any further statement before we open up questions?
Yeah, listening to all this, you all are professionals and you know what you're talking about, and I appreciate that. But if I were to discharge this, we've been living in the home for over 30 years, built in 1924. We have never had a leak in the basement, ever. And if I start discharging water into the yard, there's a possibility that'll happen, even though it's 5 feet away from the house. So that's another concern I just thought of now as you guys were talking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your statement. And if you'd stay at the podium, we may have questions for you to answer. Are there questions for the homeowner?
I do have.
Go ahead.
Discuss this all together.
When he was at the property the other day, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of explained the criteria and what I was seeing.
Do you have an opinion on this?
I mean, my opinion on the front yard would be is the situation is replicated probably hundreds of times in the village. The situation in the backyard with the bluff, I don't disagree at all that you want to keep as much water away from the bluff as possible. And yeah, so then it becomes a question more so for you guys, how you want to apply these criteria properties along. Be my opinion on it.
Well, each of these fields are different. Just see if I understand this right. You suggest front yard connect problem. Kids might. Backyard gaining slippage. That has been a two separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for clarification on the front yard, is it possible to discharge that downspout without there being interference with a walkway?
As far as it creating ice on a neighboring property, it's hard to say without seeing, actually doing it. I don't think it will create a problem just based on all the other examples throughout the village of where people have
So for
set up like that, but I'm not going to guarantee that a little bit of water wouldn't go over there.
So for the, in the photo, it looks like from the top view, there is a driveway running directly adjacent to the property. Is that the surface that you're concerned about?
The one to the south, yes. It's not only the driveway, it's also the sidewalk. My wife and I were walking the other day, and I told you this, that it was dry. Everything was dry. We're walking along, and all of a sudden there was this huge patch of ice on the sidewalk from a downspout that was under the ground, and it seeped up. And
So would it be possible for you to connect an extension from that downspout and discharge the water away from the sidewalk?
it either would go to the driveway or no. Because it would have to cross the sidewalk.
I don't see where the
Maybe I'm
sidewalk
not
is.
understanding your question.
Well, so the criteria says that you have to have at least 5 feet of permeable discharge area to discharge the downspout.
And it
Is
meets
the-
that criteria.
Is there a walkway within that 5 feet? Or what's the distance to the walkway that we're talking about here? Because it's a little bit difficult for me to tell just from the photos.
So the distance to the adjacent driveway is about 10 feet. And then the distance to the sidewalk is probably about 30 feet.
Okay.
One question. Is your basement concern from front yard?
Well, if I disconnect either, it would be from either side.
One is. And based on where the water would run out, say in the front yard, notwithstanding sidewalk,
I
would
see
you
what you're
have a basement problem, front yard?
You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. All I know is that for as long as we've been in the house and since it's been built, there's never been a flood. And if we disconnect, yeah, I don't know that.
Is there, for clarification, is there an opportunity if that would happen to come back and say you want to and get it?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know it's been raised in certain cases, depending on, it's definitely a fact by fact case. Close up. Or if it could be cap it for a year and see what happens. Samples. As far as what I've seen, avenue for that route, I don't see. Say this. Requesting a variance. Data to back.
Inspector Burris, would you like to respond to that? And can Toya quickly swear you in
Mhm.
so that,
Just as a note to everybody, before you make a comment, put the mic a little close so that the closed captioning in the back can capture
Inspector
you.
Burris, can you come up to one of these microphones?
Inspector, thank you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So with the downspout disconnection program, this criteria 1 through 5 is under parent A of the program. The next paragraph, paragraph B, states that if damage is caused to a property, it says specifically, if after implementation of all practical on-site stormwater management practices have been put in place, there is damage to either the property or a nuisance caused, that you can put the downspout back into the standpipe receiver. There isn't anything that states you need to come to the Board of Appeals for a variance. There isn't anything that says that you need to ask anyone's permission. It simply states that if, again, if damage or a nuisance is created, that it can be placed back into the standpipe receiver.
So if I understand this correctly, he could disconnect one or the other of both. Or on his own, decide that this isn't working.
That is my understanding of how the program is written. Yes.
Any further questions for Inspector Burris? Yes?
I would add to that, and I mentioned that to you when you came out. I said, if water does go on the sidewalk and it does create ice and someone slips and falls, is that my responsibility? Can I be liable for that? And yes, I am. You said it's just like shoveling the snow. I'm responsible for shoveling the snow. I'm responsible for putting down, salt if there's an ice patch. So yeah, I would be responsible for that.
So my question is, do you have an insurance policy?
We have house insurance. I mean, I don't have
Do you have an, because there are umbrella policies cover cruises. I've got one.
I have to review it.
Like,
Any further questions for the homeowner? Any final statement? Any other information you'd like us
Thank
to
you
know?
all very much.
Thank you. All right. Are any other witnesses to appear on this matter? I don't believe we have any neighboring properties or anything of that matter. At this point, I'd like to make a motion for consideration purposes only. Let's see. I'll move. I don't think that this will be my final motion, but for the purposes of consideration, I will move to, well, I'll move to uphold the village's enforcement of the downspout disconnection requirements at residential property 4074 North Lake Drive. And as such, have the Board of Appeals members enter into deliberation. Is there a second on that motion?
no, let me just ask for clarification.
Yes.
Maybe it would be better to divide these.
Oh, yes,
I-
I think so too.
I have an opinion on the back one and I have an opinion on the front one.
So do I. I'm just trying to get us as efficiently into deliberation as possible, and we can amend the motion as needed. Thank you. Can I simply move to enter into deliberation without making a formal notice? Can I do that? Okay. I move to close testimony phase of this matter and enter into deliberation. Is there a second on that motion? Excellent. So at this point in time, as Stephen has mentioned, we may have thoughts on the front and the back downspout. So Stephen, would you like to discuss your preliminary thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is that I tend to agree that the back downspout may cause further erosion. I would be in favor of front one, not so much, but based on Inspector Burris's commentary, homeowner can make an assessment. So cognizant. I would think that would be, let's see what happens. That would.
Any other thoughts? I tend to agree with Stephen's approach. I don't see that the front yard downspout should be exempt from the disconnection order. However, because we have the homeowner's testimony that he has been recommended to impose this retaining wall for the bluff area of his property, and due to the fact that we don't have definitive evidence that the manhole in the back is connected to anything. It could just be something in the ground. I'm not assured that that will cause or allow for adequate drainage. That I would be in line with the same proposition of granting an exemption from disconnection for the back downspout number 4, but not granting such for downspout number 2.
Do we vote on those separately then?
Yes.
Well, before, I agree with the comments from Steve. I think that to bifurcate the two makes a whole lot of sense. But what I'm really troubled by, and I'm sure it has no bearing on this outcome, is this notion, and I'm reading from the link that's available on the village website, combined sewer service area downspout disconnection program from February of 2021. And in there, I do see the paragraph that Inspector Burris referenced regarding the ability to reconnect. It says, if roof drainage has caused property damage or unsafe conditions, then reconnection of the combined sewer is allowed. It seems incomprehensible to me that the homeowner gets the sole discretion to determine what's allowed when we have this elaborate process to determine whether disconnection is required in the first instance. But that is way beyond the purview of this board. I just make that comment because it seems to me it's setting the whole program up for self-defeating if a homeowner gets to make, and I'm not suggesting for one moment, sir, that you would make a determination that wasn't in good faith. However, I'm absolutely asserting that others might, given the vague nature of that exception. So I had my say and I'm ready to vote.
Any other further comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I don't think we should forget about the reason for the program and the detriment. It's there for a reason. One resident. A bigger problem.
I believe it's to prevent large spread flooding of basements in great periods of rainfall.
Correct.
Yeah.
That I just want.
And excessive discharge into that small body of water we all live by, Lake Michigan,
Correct.
which I think is an equally important consideration.
All right, are we ready to proceed to a vote? Anyone like to propose a motion? And if we do want to bifurcate this, I'm okay with that if someone wants to attempt to craft a motion, or I can attempt to put one together.
For a motion, I want to make that in
Yes.
order to approve or disapprove of the variance, if we are going to, that it does need, we need to identify which criteria the ordinance that we're finding hasn't met, so that we can identify that on. So the variance should be granted this way or that way.
So for the front yard downspout, if we were to phrase it as we deny an exemption from enforcement of the downspout disconnection notice for downspout, whatever, I don't even know how to identify it. Is there a southwest or northwest?
The southwest. Southwest.
Southwest is number 2.
Southwest corner of the home. Do we have to provide a reason for denying that?
No,
Or is
because
it only if we are granting an exemption
If we're
from the
granting an
enforcement?
exemption, we need to identify which subsection A through E not met. If we're denying the variance, it's assumed that all 5 of the conditions.
Okay.
Couldn't be.
Okay, and can you rephrase, or can you repeat the subsections that deal with erosion or instability in the land? I think there is one at least.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
covers
And I
that.
can walk through all 5 and just, I think subsection A, the roof drain is external. I think that's applicable to both. There's no question about that. Subsection B, sufficient space is available to locate the discharge point at least 5 feet away from the basement or foundation walls and property lines. I know that's a condition for, or a concern for, I believe, number 2. So that's the 5 feet away from the foundation. Pervious surface space is available at the discharge point. I think that's also a concern for 2. Subsection D is the discharge location is level or slopes away from the structure, but not so steep that the discharge would cause erosion. I think that's more applicable to subsection 4. And then, downspout number 4. Subsection E is the discharge water will not create ice on pedestrian walkways or otherwise create a nuisance for adjoining properties. And I think that's more applicable, number 2.
Okay.
So essentially, by only a couple words for subsection B, 5 feet away from the house. Subsection C, whether pervious surface space is available. Subsection D, slope structure away from the structure. Subsection E, creating ice or
And what's the citation for that?
ordinance 415-8
415.18
B
B3 and then sub A through. Okay.
So was there one?
The erosion was,
D.
yep, for the slope. Picturing it.
But wouldn't it be possible to state it, which I think is what Wendy is aiming at by getting the statute reference, to simply say we find that the front downspout complies with the 5 requirements of section such and such of the code, and therefore disconnection is appropriate without identifying each one.
Correct. And I
Yeah.
think if the route was to be, we are denying the variance request
Yeah.
because all 5 sections apply, I don't think we need to identify, but if we are finding for a variance, we need to identify which subsection.
The subsection. And well, I'm looking at a different format of that, but it would, D would be the one that we find does not apply. The one that leads to erosion, the potential for erosion.
For downspout 4, I believe.
Yes,
Yes.
right,
yep.
right.
I know for downspout 2, there were a couple other concerns. Which one? Find it.
Okay. So for our first motion, here's a proposal, and perhaps you can tell me whether it sounds good or not. I'll move to deny an exemption from the enforcement of the downspout disconnection notice issued to 4074 North Lake Drive as to the downspout located at the southwest corner of the property.
That's number 2.
Yes. Would that be adequate?
I would emphasize because all 5 criteria outlined in
All 5 criteria for disconnection?
correct are met.
Okay. And then for the southeast downspout, correct?
Correct.
Okay. As to the southeast. Okay, so a proposal here. I move to grant an exemption from the enforcement of the downspout disconnection notice issued to 4074 North Lake Drive as to the southeast, as to the downspout located at the southeast corner of the property, as that downspout meets an exemption under Municipal Ordinance 415.18 B3D. Do we need to establish the facts that support that, or is that adequate?
I think that would be adequate.
Okay.
As long as everyone's.
All right. Is there any further discussion, or shall I make some motions? Okay. So I will move to deny an exemption from the enforcement of the downspout disconnection notice issued to 4074 North Lake Drive as to the downspout located at the southwest corner of the property, as all 5 criteria for disconnection are met.
Yay.
Or is there a second? Let me get a second first.
I'll second.
Thank you. And Toya, can you call a vote, please? Yes. Sorry.
Dude, this is a omnibus, both
This is for the southwest
Just that
Corner.
one alone?
only, and then we'll do the second one after.
Kevin Matthews,
Aye.
Scott Walligora, James Robinson,
Aye.
Stephen Isaacson, Wendy Smith.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried 5-0.
Okay, so as for the southwest corner downspout, that has been denied from exemption. Now we will make a motion for the backyard or the southeast corner. So I will move to grant an exemption from the enforcement of the downspout disconnection notice issued to 4074 North Lake Drive as to the downspout located at the southeast corner of the property, as it meets an exception under the municipal code section 415.18 sub B3D. Is there a second? Thank you. Toya, can you call a vote, please?
Wendy Smith,
Aye.
Stephen Isaacson, James Robinson,
Aye.
Scott Walligora,
Aye.
Kevin Matthews.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0.
So that exemption has been granted. At this time, I believe we are complete with our agenda. Is there, all those in favor of adjourning this meeting, excuse me, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
That's a good.
One moment, if you all could just hold for just one moment. Hold on just one moment.